Hey everybody, welcome back to Adventures with Dice. This is Rob, I'm your host for these videos, and this week we are continuing my ICRPG campaign after action report, I guess. It's a campaign that takes place every other Saturday, so these videos go up every 2 weeks, and like all my ICRPG videos, they're going to go into one playlist that you can just go through and watch everything, and you can watch the campaign unfold in order if you'd like. The link for that'll that'll just be in the playlist thing. Links in the description are for my Patreon, which if you'd like to join, you get everything for $1, and the Amazon wish list, and the Rob's Game Group on Facebook. All that's in the links. But anyway, we are continuing our story, and in the last episode, they had returned Nadir's sons, and there was a feast being held, and in the middle of the feast, a group of men, heavily armored witch hunters from the White Flame, showed up in town and set up a base of operations. These guys are bad news. We're going to fast forward a couple of weeks, and they've been in town pushing their propaganda against anti-mages, anti-wizards, witches, whatever. And this story starts with the Blight. So we didn't finish this one all in one night, and the reason for that mainly has to do with we got a really late start. One of our players couldn't be here on time. He had some stuff going on. So it was like an hour and a half late before we could start, and we only played till like 11 anyway, so we only got about half the normal playtime in. And this adventure was written where it could be a little bigger than the last one, so it depended on which way you went with it. And they had the choice to go one of two ways, which I'll explain more as I go through this. So just to set the scene for you, the Blight Part 1, a strange fungus has started growing on the crops around Oakvale. People are getting sick. Some are even dying when they can't break the fever. The sickness brings on fever, vomiting, blood, weakness, madness, and even death. So it's pretty bad news, right? 7 people in Oakvale have died from it already, and several more are getting sick. And it seems to be growing and spreading. Lord Caspius, the head witch hunter in town, has been preaching in the town square that, quote-unquote, "This is the work of the dark arts, and a witch is behind it and must be rooted out and burned." Let's see, the town elder, Mathis Havor, has instructed everyone to eat only from the food storage barns and use only fresh water from the nearby river, not the town well. But as crops lay rotting in the fields and the townsfolk grow sicker and die, fear begins to grip the community, and these precautions are apparently not helping. So our heroes are in a tavern. Ooh, that's pretty original. Having a few drinks one afternoon when Father Gorn, who is the local priest, now he's a priest of the Temple of Light, which are generally considered good guys and not affiliated with the White Flame at all. Those are two different sects completely. He comes into the bar, or the tavern. He comes up to the keep, barkeep, and he has a few words with him. And then he goes to leave. He comes by the hero's table, and I told him, I said, "You notice this, even when somebody sitting across the room probably wouldn't." He stops and he does like he's doing a blessing upon you. But as he leaves, he very nonchalantly slips a note onto the table, and then he just walks out. So, they open the note and read it, and the note says, "Meet me at the church as soon as you can." Now, one of our players, in fact, the guy who was late, he is playing Balin the elf, and he is very, very suspicious of everyone, including his companions. And I think it's just the way he's role-playing him, but everything is a trap. No one can be trusted, even though I keep reiterating this is a small village, and they have been very welcoming to you, and they have, gone out of their way to make sure that you're not having to stay out in the wilds because you're an elf, because generally elves are not liked in this area because of the war up north. So, but these people have been accepting. And in fact, before going to meet the priest, he scouts it out first to make sure they're not walking into a trap. To which I played on, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, and when you get there, you're looking at the church up the hill, and you see the priest is out back digging 4 graves, and they're all like, what? And I'm like, nah, I'm just kidding. He is digging a grave, but you have to remember, people are dying, so he's trying to get a jump start on any burials he has to do. So the 2 female characters, they end up going ahead and going to the church and meeting the priest, and the dwarf and the elf separate. The dwarf wants to go see the armorer and see if he can about getting a new shield made. So he does that because he lost his shield in the last battle. He sacrificed the shield to absorb all of the damage from one hit that he took, which is a pretty neat ability, but then it leaves you without the shield. So you had to go purchase a new shield. So he went and did that. Balin, of course, went around and did various things, gathering supplies and whatnot. And then they separately made their way to the church. Anyway, they end up all getting in the church and talking to Father Gorn, who tells them, he's like, hey, this plague, I wholly believe, is of a magical source. However, I do not share Lord Caspius' view that burning a witch is going to cure it. Now, there is a monastery 2 days north of Oakvale. The monks that live there are known to specialize in healing and cleansing magic. And if anyone can help, I believe they can. So he ends up charging the PCs with traveling to the Greenstone Abbey and seeking the help of the monks before more people get sick and die. So the heroes obviously don't have to undertake this mission, but at the rate things are going, if they don't, then Oakvale is pretty much done for. So at this point, you can see I have my flow chart for events, and the first event starts out there in Oakvale, gathering all this information, and they're going to be traveling to the Greenstone Abbey. Now they have 2 choices as far as which way to go. One way is the direct path through the wilds, which is going to be a couple of extra encounters before they get to the Abbey, and then or they could take the safe road and go directly to the Abbey. Now, why would you not take the safe road? Well, the road north is safer. However, because of the way the road is built and where it goes, it is a longer journey. So it's twice as long to get to the Abbey going by the road. Now, if they choose the road north, they are going to eat up twice as many supplies. So it's 1 supply per day going through the wilds. So on a 2-day trip, they would eat up 2 supplies. However, if they take the north road, the safe passage, it's going to be 4 supplies because it's going to take 4 days to get there. And they don't know about the quicker trip back, which that comes in down here. They have to get to the Abbey and be successful in order to find out about that, which we'll get to in a minute. But basically what happens is they have encounter in the wilds. They can take the shorter path, and he warned them the shorter path through the wilds is going to be more dangerous. So they were warned about this before going into it, and it turned out to be pretty dangerous. And then my wife, she made everything worse with her character. But we'll get to that when I do the room, show you the room. But I have 2 extra encounters set up that they'll go through, in the wilds. I'm not going to reveal some of that information because, you know, I have players that may watch this and I don't want to give things away. But either way, it splits and then takes them to Encounter 5. Now, Encounter 5 is the Blighted Abbey, and then they have to get into the chapel to get to the end of it. And then from there, they can catch a fast draft back downriver. Now, the reason that I use that chart is because, like it describes in the rule book, it helps me to plot out my rooms. Okay, even though these are going to be outdoor encounters, I am still going to be using my Ultimate Dungeon board, and this is my outdoor one that I made. But my Ultimate Dungeon board is going to be what I use for most of the room design getting to the Abbey. Now, when I put these in my notebook, I started out with number 3, which is the safer road, and I don't want to give away too much information on it, but I have the number 3 here for which room it is, or which part of the story it is, and then any rolls they have to make. Here's the room target number here, and then I have all the information about what can happen on the road. And then I go back to number 2 and target number 12, and this one is listed as the wilds, and it's Encounter 1 in the wilds, and everything about it is listed here. The next page is plotted out as well, and then I map out everything that I'm going to do on the tabletop here, which also helps me to be able to just flip this open and go, okay, that goes here, that goes here, that goes here, boom, we can play. So I don't necessarily have to set everything up ahead of time and have it staged off to the side, because I have notes on where everything's going to go. I just flip my notebook open and I start going at it. And then my timer, threat, and treat are listed on the next page. And then we have Encounter 4, which I'm not going to reveal right now because they didn't get into that. And then Encounter 5, and then Encounter 6. All of that's in here. I don't want to show anything because I have players that watch this. And then it will end with the aftermath, provided they survive it. It'll end with the aftermath down here. But I'll show more of that in the next video after they get through some of it. So they decided time was of the essence, and they needed, and there was some back and forth about it because not everybody wanted to take the wild. There was one player that definitely wanted to take the safe road. However, the group decided as a whole that time was of the essence, so they needed to get moving. So they take off trekking through the wilds, and basically I have one encounter per day on their trip there set up, and then they have the potential. They also have the potential to, because you don't earn XP, they have the potential to gain more loot. They didn't gain, there was a little bit of loot in this one, but they didn't get it for a very particular reason, which will be described when I show you the room. So they got through this first room, which was a big fight. It took a while, but remember, we only had like an hour and a half of playtime to get everything done because we got a late start. So they probably could have done at least 2, maybe 3 had we had the full session, but they didn't. So I've only got this one to show this week. So now that you have the setup, you understand where they're going, why they're going, and what their goal is. We're going to switch over to the tabletop, and I'm going to show you the room design and how the battle went down as best as I can remember it. So let's go check that out now. Okay, so here is the room design for the first encounter. First thing I do after setting it up is I put my card out showing the big 12 on it, so that they can all see what the target number is. We don't need that up there anymore. So they are, look at my book, I'll give the description. About midday, the first day of travel through the wilderness, it starts getting thicker and more difficult to traverse. There's an eerie silence that falls across the woodlands. The landscape around you takes on a more sinister tone. The grass beneath your feet is dead, dry, and crackling. That's going to be important. That's going to come in later. The plants and trees around you give way to dry, dead wood and wilted plants. Again, important for later. Through the gloom, you see 3 figures ahead of you. And then I made them do a wisdom check versus the target number of the room to determine what the figures were. And a couple of them passed and realized that they weren't figures coming toward them. They were, oddly enough, 3 creepy looking scarecrows that were set up out here in the wilds. Now, the scarecrows are, by the rule book, they're a manifestation of Durothrax and eyes and ears of Durothrax, harbingers of her doom. And I liked that idea, but I didn't necessarily want to tie it directly to Durothrax. So I just made them harbingers of doom instead. And as they approached, the scarecrows have 3 abilities: Psychic Insult, Ill News, and Beacon. So the Psychic Insult they can use to make a character make a charisma check, and if they fail it, then they are overcome with, you know, failures of their past, and they lose a turn, which became important later on in the game. Ill News, which they got hit with immediately, was these multiple voices in their head at the same time saying, "For you tread where dirt holds the dead. The blight is inbound, no hope shall be found. Those who don't rest now rise from the crest. In darkness and gloom, this place is your doom." But hey, that didn't scare our heroes. Our heroes were like, whatever, dude. And I just let the skeletons have the first action of the turn to do their thing. The first one howls this unearthly howl, and this giant boulder here, this big old rock, starts to have cracks all through it, and it breaks apart, it bursts, right? And it explodes, revealing this monolith from inside of it. And it immediately starts drawing skeletons of ancient dead warriors out of the ground. And I may not have the numbers right per turn, but it ended up being a lot because it was doing it every turn. So basically what happens is the heroes rush forward. Our dwarf Dulgan runs up here and he starts, he destroys a skeleton. And again, I don't track hearts in my book. I have some D10s and D12s, a bunch of extra ones, and when a thing starts taking damage, I put a damage die next to it. Yeah, the players know how low the creatures are, but I really don't care. We're having fun, and it keeps the battle moving along. So there was some of that. Tina's character, Jules, moved over here, and I think she cast Arcane Bolt. Didn't do much. Ballin was back here behind this bush, which was funny enough how he indicated whether he managed to stay hidden every turn. Because I told him, I'm like, okay, well, you're hidden now, but if you start attacking things, you're going to have to make a check, which for him is easy, to remain hidden. Then if you fail it, then we'll just move the bush here because you can be seen. But if you pass it, then we'll keep the bush in front of you because you can't be seen. So everybody's moving around doing stuff. He takes a couple of shots at the monolith. His arrows are just dinging off because you have to do bashing damage to these big stone structures to actually destroy them. And he's got these little piercing arrows that just aren't doing a whole lot. So they're fighting. Skelly's starting moving in on everybody. And then the next turn, even more of them get summoned. And we got a whole bunch of them on the table here. And they start piling up, taking some pot shots. Haley's character, Delphi, comes over here to help Jules, because Jules is in trouble. She's got all these skeletons, and she has a bead necklace that is allowing her to use the spell Atom Palm, which is a seismic thing where it lifts her up in the air and boom, she slams down. And when she slams down, it does ultimate damage to everybody near. And if she does it the first time, she wipes most of these guys out and like all but one of these guys. Then the next turn, boom, we summon a bunch more guys back in. And they start moving around. Dolgan takes another guy out. I think it was a couple of turns of Balin still shooting at the thing, trying to figure out a way to stop it, because they realized, okay, this thing's just going to keep spawning skeletons out of the ground. And it was a spawner. That was the whole point in it. Now, at this point, the one of the other scarecrows howls, and then the same thing happens to this boulder. It explodes, and I had another one, so I dropped another monolith back here, which immediately starts summoning more skeletons. Let me go up a little further. So now we've got 2 spawners on the table, which has skeletons. This guy moves up. This guy moves in here. This guy moves up. Now my skeletons, I ran them as slow, so because they were ancient dead and they really could not do anything other than move or attack. So it was one or the other. So there was no damage here, but it starts to pile up. Like the next turn, we start getting more skeletons over here. These guys are moving up, getting over here to the fight. We still got one back here, and some more spawn in. And we just got a bunch of skeleton goodness going on here. Dolgan decides, yeah, screw these skeletons. I got an armor class 18. Delphi cast, not Delphi, I'm sorry. Jules cast her crystal spell, which gives all of her allies within near a +3 to their AC. So he had a really good AC. He's sitting at 20, and he's like, let the skeletons hit me. I'm just going to start bashing on this rock. So, again, Delphi, every turn, she's doing this Atom Palm, and she's knocking more and more of these skellies out. They're hitting the ground. Boom, boom, boom. A couple of the skellies did get some touch attacks off, where they do like cold magic damage from their cold, deathless hands. But the fight goes back and forth for a few minutes, and then finally, because these things had 2 hearts worth of damage they could take from bashing weapons, Dolgan manages to destroy the first one. So it's gone. And he starts pushing forward to get over here and destroy the other one. He ends up over here. And we end up with all but, there's like one guy left over here at this point. And I think he was right there. And then Jules moves up here. Delphi does the same. This guy kind of moves out here to follow. And Balin's still taking pot shots. He's shooting the skeletons now, which have 3 hearts, or the skeletons, the scarecrows, which have 3 hearts apiece, trying to take them out because he realizes, hey, these things are howling and they're summoning these big rock monoliths, the structures that are summoning these things. We got to take them out. So it was at this point that now that the scarecrows could see everybody real well, they started using their psychic, was it the psychic insult? Let me look again. Yeah, their psychic insult. And we had a whole turn where Dolgan, Delphi, and Jules failed and all lost a turn. So this guy moves up. Balin is the only one who didn't lose his turn at that point. Now, when you start doing things to take players' turns away from them, they get mad about it, and they want retribution, and they want it bad. So, there's another turn of more skellies showing up, and Dolgan getting surrounded. I think he got 1 hit off on the monolith. before he got surrounded, because he had like 5 skeletons around him at one point. Like nobody could even get to him. And it was at that point that Jules gets mad about it, and she's like, all right, these skellies got to go. Now, she's been spending several turns because we had spell burn in effect. They'd been careful about their casting and hoping that they didn't overshoot their spell burn and lose the ability to cast. Delphi had 2 or 3 turns where she failed to cast. Jules decided, that's it. These things are not taking my turn anymore. I'm casting Fireball, and I'm dumping everything into it. Now, she has her magic damage that she's going to be dropping with this Fireball, but she also has all these points saved up that she hasn't spent, because every turn she doesn't cast, she can concentrate and build up another D6, which she rolls, and she can store those up to 6d6 worth of those points, and then add them to the damage. So she's got a whole bunch of points added up. And she has an item she got from loot that allows her to double fire damage. So she drops the Fireball, and I have a template. I didn't get it out, but it's like this big. So she drops a Fireball over here and does a massive amount of damage. And I did not give the Scarecrows a save because they're Scarecrows. How are they going to dodge? They're not going to dodge. So, blam! And she actually destroys all 3 Scarecrows. And they are wiped out. Now, I could have, at this point, been like, okay, well, the Scarecrows are gone, so the Skellies drop. But I didn't want to do that because the skeletons were not being summoned by the Scarecrow. The monolith itself, now activated, was bringing these skeletons out every turn. So until they destroyed this, these guys are going to keep popping. Now, here's where things went bad. Remember I told you in the description about all the dead dry grass and dead dry trees and everything. I warned them ahead of time because I knew that she was going to use Fireball the first chance she got. So there were going to be repercussions if she did. And of course, you know, the minute that she actually took some difficulty, like, you know, she lost her turn, Jules was like, nope, Fireball, maximum. And she blows everything up over here, and now everything in this template is on fire. It's dry, it's dead stuff, it's catching on fire and spreading fast. And at this point I'm like, okay, well, now we already had one timer, which I didn't mention, but that timer was for the second monolith to be summoned to come in. The treat here was actually the thicket of woods that they didn't use at all. They could have funneled skeletons through here, and it would have eaten up a lot more actions and time, because the skeletons could only move like half as far through here because the thickets were so, well, thick. But they didn't really use those to that point. The fire ends up taking out the guy that was in front of Dolgan. Now, things get twice as bad right here because there is an explosion from the Fireball. So now the field is on fire, a raging fire amongst all this dead grass and dead trees. And then I crit on Dolgan and drop him. And he rolls his D4. And I think he had 4 rounds before he was done for. And at this point, Delphi comes up here because she sees an opening. She tries to get in and save him. Jules is like, oh man, they discuss it for a few minutes. So like, what are we going to do? Because now the new timer was they had 4 rounds before this entire area was on fire. So they had to basically shit or get. They had to get out of here, right? So Jules says, okay, well, I'm going to cast Doorway. And she opens it right here. And they kind of argue for a little while about where to open it, because she can only open it to places she's familiar with, that she's been. So she opens it like 10 minutes back down the path. So, I mean, literally from 10 minutes away, they could still see the fire. That's how close they were. But they wanted to get out of this situation. So she gets the door open. Ballin's coming up here, to where the door is. Jules steps through the door. Woo! She teleports 10 minutes back down the path. Balin realizes there's nothing he can do, and he can't save Dolgan, so he jumps through the door. Woo! And then he's gone. Now, handed out my first hero card of the night right here, because Delphi tried to heal and failed. Now, the way I run the game, and you know, you can run it however you want to, but you have two actions basically. You can move and do an action, whether it's cast a spell, attack, or whatever. If you forego your movement and stay where you're at, I will let you do a second action. And I know some DMs run it like that, some don't, whatever. That's how I run it. Does it give the characters a little more power? Sure. But, you know, it's supposed to be epic fantasy, so I'm okay with that. So she tries to heal Dolgan right here, hoping that he will get up on his own power, and then they can both make for the doorway, which is back over here. She fails the roll miserably, and is left with a choice. She can either say goodbye to Dolgan and flee through the doorway, or she can stay where she's at and try again to heal him, which might get them both killed. She thinks about it for a minute, and she says, no, I'm not leaving my friend behind. So she stays and decides to forego her movement and try to heal Balin again. So she does, and she succeeds really well. It was at this point that I handed out my first hero coin to her because of her sacrifice. She knew that she might die in this situation, but she was determined to help a fallen friend anyway. Who, Balin stands up, now feeling pretty good from all the magic healing he just got. Not Balin, I'm sorry. Dolgan stands up, feeling pretty good from the magic healing he just got. And he's like, okay, well, she doesn't have any actions, but can I charge forward, grabbing her and dragging her through the doorway? I'm like, all right, we'll make a hard strength check. So it's a 15, and he rolled like a 19 on it or something. So boom, he grabs her, and they jump through the doorway. Now the doorway stays open for like a D4 rounds or something. So a few skeletons end up wandering through it, and we don't even run a battle for that. I'm just like, yeah, you wipe them out on the other side. So the few skeletons that did get through get killed, and then before they know it, because they can see it from down the, I keep saying down the road, there's not a road there, but down in the 10 minutes away in the wilderness, this entire area is on fire and it's spreading. I'm like, well, you know, you were warned about the dry deadwood and decided to drop fireball anyway, and you don't have any spells that can put the fire out. So they decided to start skirting the fire and continue north and just let what happens happens. And they're going to find out later that it eventually, all this burned up. The monolith ended up collapsing in the fire and dropping into a pit, and it was no longer summoning anything. There were a few skeletons out in the wilderness, but most of them got burned up because the wildfire, you know, think California wildfires, they're pretty bad. Everything was on fire and burning, and it actually burned, you know, probably 100 acres of woodland before it reached the river on one side, and then I had a thunderstorm put most of it out. So they did succeed in that and eventually defeat that, but they didn't get the loot. Remember I said they didn't get the loot, which there wasn't a ton of loot here. There was a little bit of loot, but they didn't get it because it burned up. They incinerated it. Now, it's okay that Jules did the thing with the fireball, because I'm hoping that that will help her in the future to think about when using something like fireball and you've got combustible stuff all around you. It may not be the best idea to use that because you could blow up other stuff. For instance, it doesn't, like the way I've always run fireballs, I understand that, you know, classic D&D doesn't do it like this, but when you have an exploding fireball like in a tight confined space, you could cause that combustion of force of air, and fire could cause a collapse in a tunnel or a room. So, you know, we'll see how that goes when they're underground again, or in some ruined castle or something. But that's pretty much as far as they got. So they're moving around and about to head towards their second major encounter, and we'll be back to see how that goes in a couple of weeks. Hopefully I'll finish having all the skeletons painted by then. But I've got some really interesting encounters set up that I think are going to be a lot of fun. The players definitely said the encounter was really hard because of the way I had it set up, but they enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a challenge, but it wasn't something they could not get out of. Now, I think they are definitely looking for some water-based spells, or maybe some spells that do damage but don't set everything around you on fire. That could be pretty important to them. But anyway, we'll see how that goes in the next installment, part 2 of the Blight, which will be about 2 weeks from today. I should have that video up. I hope you've enjoyed it's not really room design. This is how I designed the room or the encounter. But I have some other videos coming up on ICRPG that aren't really related to the campaign. I've got one for my DM's kit. I've got one about what I call drop-in encounters. It's a little idea I came up with that I've started putting in my GM's notebook here. So hopefully you'll enjoy those as well. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the ICRPG videos, so I'm going to keep making them. It's also the game I'm playing the most of, and I'm enjoying it. So until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.